Thank you for coming this morning. Our speaker today is Jim Lemons, Dr. Jim Lemons, who most of you, I think, have at least met. And I'm not going to take much time. I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Celia. Is that good volume? So, if it's okay, we'll introduce with a word of prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for letting us gather in your grace. Fill our hearts with your peace, your love, with the reality of the struggles that we all face, to help become more aware, to use your love to help us heal. We ask this in your name. Amen. Well, thanks for venturing out this morning. Yeah, Celia said I oftentimes do have trouble. I don't have trouble focusing initially, but yeah, then the focus can change. Hey, Bob, welcome. Good to see you. And that's because, in large part, what I'm going to talk about this morning. I've spoken a couple of times on the concept of love and unanticipated consequences of love. And this relates certainly, but over the last month I was reflecting again on all of the serendipity that seems to be around us. And so I started thinking more about all the people I was interfacing with for very different reasons, and where those connections were leading very quickly, and it's happening all the time, of course, to all of us. But I paused a minute just to try to reflect on some of those connections and how they happened, and how they seem to be rippling so rapidly in different ways. Because I think we're blessed with our faith, which often is a struggle. But it offers this opportunity, I think, that to see things and see the world and our creation in a different way, so that I think we, over time, become more aware, become more sensitive, hypersensitive even, to these moments. So I was just reminding myself of how blessed my life is, and trying to discern a little more carefully how can we open ourselves more to these grace moments and perhaps take advantage of them. I was just mentioning to Celia Friday, Carol Gaston, and I'll mention her in a minute, who's a professor at CTS, brought her students down to Eskenazi Health. Used to be Wishart, and that's where I'm staffing in the newborn intensive care unit right now. But she wanted me to speak to her class, so she brought her students, and she loves Eskenazi because it has a green farm on the roof. And I was talking there, and at the end, one of the students, he was probably 55 years old, still on our journey, and he asked, he said, how do you deal with the stress with your own? How does your staff deal with this? Because it is very intense, a lot of death and dying. And I said, to me, it's all of those journeys are, to me, they're energizing. Physically, they're fatiguing, and sometimes mentally, and emotionally, of course. But I find these relationships and occasions filling to me. I don't know if that's the right place to be, but over time, I've often asked, that question of others and so on. How do you stay filled? And I've been reflecting. I feel this is what fills me. So who crosses our path? How do we attend to that? Are we able to intersect, and see the people that cross our path? Because not looking at people as you're walking by, I find is a bad habit. I love to see people and hear, if you can, touch or smell, whatever it is, and that's a gift. Those senses are a gift, and we should use them and be aware to try to see and learn from these journeys. So I found this I'm sure you can find a billion quotes or make up your own, but I just found this Googling, and they used the word crossed rather than cross, and I thought that's pretty appropriate for what we're about. But it doesn't matter if it's a cross or another symbol of a different religion, but for us it's a cross, and it's very meaningful, I think, to know. And then I've always loved this definition of compassion. It may not be the ultimate definition, but it's the foundation, I think. And one of the first books that Carol Johnston told me to read when I first met her was called Darwin, Divinity, and Dance of the Cosmos. And I had never used the word cosmos other than in a cartoon or something before. But I thought, in that book, the essence of that book is an understanding of our faith as truly intersection of everything. Somebody gave me a DVD, and I still haven't looked at it. It's called The Black Hole, written by an astrophysicist. But it's the black hole with a W. And I thought, yeah, because we are all made of the same stardust, the same molecules that happened, we think, from the original Big Bang. They're still here, and we're part of that dust. And we'll filter our dust onto somebody else's dust 300 years from now, or 1,000 years from now. We're reflective of dust that came from, the continuity. So it is, in a way, that's another way of thinking of the interconnectedness of all things. Well, just briefly, I'll tell you a little bit, just briefly about myself, because it's relevant in one or two ways. But I was one of 5 boys. I was the second one. Yeah, we always show this now. Five of us get together. Of course, our youngest one, David, he still lives that out. we tried to get him recently to pose in there. But we grew up in outside of Chicago, and originally we're like all working poor. And one of the first occasions of my faith in understanding generosity was walking with my mom. It was in December, a foot of snow, and I was probably 4 or 5 years old. It's one of my first memories. And I was pulling a wagon, and we didn't have a car. So this neighbor, we were going right by the 5 and dime store, there, and the neighbor drove by and stopped and offered to give us a ride. And my mom said no. And so I had a snip, which I did a lot then. I remember she paddled me, and so we went to the grocery store, got the groceries, and I was slugging it back in the snow, I remember, and then she stopped in front of the dime store and let me go in, because it was before Christmas, and she gave me $1. And so I walked in, searched the whole store to buy a gift for our family, and I bought it, for some reason, a nativity scene, a little. So I took it up to the counter. I remember looking up and handed it to the lady. My mom was standing over on the side, and she shook her head. And then she turned around and got 48 more cents or whatever it was out of her purse and put it in there. And I remember that vividly. For some reason, obviously, I didn't think about it for decades, but for some reason it was imprinted into me, the generosity of that woman who gave, me money. So, gets me emotional. I know, you're only starting. So, but we grew up in a very healthy family, and our parents took us. My mom just recently died. She died May 1st, almost 96, and she was kind of our. She had a lot of struggle, a lot of journey, but was a salt of the earth person. And fairly simple values, but very progressive, thinking back of the things that she was a quiet activist and very solid, we learned over time, and consistent in her embracing of the world. She didn't understand prejudice. Black-white was huge then. She lost a lot of friends because of that perspective of teaching us that we're all the same and so on. So we all gathered fairly recently. And these are my 5 brothers now, my 4 brothers, now, from all over the country. We live, in Utah and Denver and Massachusetts and Atlanta areas. And we all turned out pretty good, I have to say. And we, I think, owe that particularly to my mom and my dad. My dad died of Alzheimer's some time ago in 1996. But we reflect on those consistent values and all the people my mom connected with so naturally in a quiet way. She never seemed to, make a to-do about it, but she was always willing to step out. Even when she was 95 years old in the retirement community, she always got on a bus and went to a high school concert. She always, she just always made a little bit of effort in a quiet way to join and be present. And so I think we learned some of that. So I'm going to talk about a few of the connections that happened over the last few months, just a tiny fraction of the people where these have gone. And of course, our big connection recently was with these 2 little guys. These are our grandsons, Nicholas and Benjamin, and we were fortunate to take them to Disney World a month ago, 3 weeks ago, with our daughter. She wanted us to fly to North Carolina and then rent a minivan. And them and I were dreading that. As a 20-month-old and a 5-year-old, for 10, 11 hours, whatever, we were dreading that part. But they were phenomenal. The only person who melted down actually was Pam. She did. And the kids were fabulous the entire way. Both, they never hardly blinked. They had smiles, and we had an incredible week. And while we were there, there were probably, it was not a slow time of the year. I don't know, there were 500,000 people in the park, whatever. But the kids were just phenomenal, and we were seeing the magic through their eyes. And when we were waiting, I think by the carousel or something, one time, these masses of people, and who should wander over but a couple with their daughter and soon-to-be son-in-law and their child from Indianapolis. He's a handyman. One of the nicest couples, hardworking, and have done a tremendous amount of work for no cost, essentially, minimum wage craftsmen. And here we knew they were out of town, but we had no idea where they were. Here they found us in this place. And it's an interracial marriage. They had an interracial child, and they were going to get married in St. Petersburg. And I looked at Tim. They found us, Tim and Melissa. I thought, how does this kind of thing happen? And it does, of course, to all of us, but it meant so much at the moment that they saw us. And it just brought to me something very meaningful. And that we got to meet these. This was Tuesday, and on Wednesday, or Thursday, they were getting married. And they had a little 7-year-old little boy. Yeah. And it was so nice. Young black man, wonderful, with their daughter, and it just felt right. So that was kind of a first jostle to me to think about this. And these are our 2. And they are our best friends. And our 2 sons are here, Ken and Kevin are here. And they're best friends as well. reminded me of the, and this is our whole family together at our house, and David's a soccer coach out at North Carolina State. But at this moment, the blessings of these two, as many of you have grandkids or your own kids, the unconditional love that they truly see and feel is such a constant reminder, I think, to us. So my professional life is done at the medical center. We run 9 different newborn intensive care units around the city and state. Of course, Riley and Methodist and Eskenazi and Community North and St. Francis, IU North, and Arnett up in Lafayette, and the Women's Hospital in Evansville. So our faculty are in the house there, we say, 24 hours a day. So I still spend, I know to Pam's chagrin, much of my time working. I just love the teaching and the hands-on care. I don't run things anymore. I pretended that I once ran things, but I know my wife is the one who runs things. But I do, and I love being there, and it's very intense work. But it's this reminder, and our first minister here, I thought captured the essence of love. If you can make it tangible, palpable. To me, if I could love our Creator that much, I feel like I've done a pretty good human job of it. But I know His love is greater by far. But that gives an inkling, and this is kind of where I live. And here it's a lot of technology, huge personnel, expertise, committed to very tiny lives. And it was interesting that on Friday, when Carol brought the class down at 1 o'clock, and I talked with them for a couple of hours, that morning I was walking over to Eskenazi, and I'll show you another picture in a second. But as I walked into Eskenazi, a baby like this, a little smaller than this, was just delivering at 22 weeks and 1 day gestation. And that's right on the threshold of viability. 23 weeks, we think, is probably the minimum. We've had an occasional baby that survived, but we don't recommend resuscitating a baby at this gestation who's pre-viable. This baby is about 24 weeks, so this baby's on a ventilator, but a little smaller than that, so a little less than a pound. To an Hispanic family, wonderful. It was a lot of struggles. So we went in, and the baby delivered after about a half hour. But it was sorry. Even though it was right the baby died, it was a real struggle of guilt for the parents because this was a third baby. The other two were by a previous father, another father. But this was a wonderful father who was there. I didn't know them, but I went up and talked to him. The first thing I asked was if their baby has a name. This was before being born, and he did. So we talked for a while through an interpreter. We had a wonderful interpreter there and so on. But it was, again, an opportunity to connect, and to connect with the residents and students and the nurse practitioners that were with me, because I like doing this kind of work, so I like to teach, especially that part. How do you do that? I didn't cry. Sometimes I do. But how do you engage and gain trust in that moment, where you can help those parents walk through that? They desperately wanted this son, and part of it was guilt that they feel. They caused this somehow, even though they took great care of themselves during the pregnancy. So I went over afterwards the next morning to see them on Saturday and talked with them for a while about some of the practical things you experienced. it's wonderful that they had a name for him, even before being born, and oftentimes parents do. But it was a perfect little boy. When you see a baby at that halfway through pregnancy, perfectly formed. One of the choir members was getting coffee this morning. He said, "You know, Jim, this fall is really great." He said, "I forget." I said, "Well, that's probably why we have these seasons. Remind us of the beauty of the creation." And we get reminded every single day, even though some of these babies are, quote, imperfect when they're born, and we take care of the sick babies still. But it reminded me of this, because there's such a prevalence of suffering in our world, of struggle. Although it reminded me even more of a quote that Stella had in her book. It was an African quote. It was, "To struggle means you're not dying, right? You're not dead. You haven't died. To struggle is not to die." Yeah. And that's a very hard way when you're in the midst of struggle. There is so much suffering and so much difficult challenge in, trying to reconcile our world and our faith and love and hate and violence and peace and so on. But it is an opportunity always to become more sensitive and to understand the power of love, which I still think is so much greater than any other. And while I was walking into Riley, before I walked into Eskenazi, yeah, hey, Tommy, I didn't see you come in. Well, the last few months, Bob would not know this, but I ran into Bob, I don't know, 5 times maybe over the last 6 months. First time I was coming down the elevator, came out of the Eskenazi, and there was Bob sitting with a friend in Eskenazi. And Bob was kind enough. Bob sits in the middle of our sanctuary, maybe the 4th row, something. And I always love when I usher, I come back out and I see his face there, and it just makes me smile. So I always appreciate that. But I saw him a few months ago with this man, and it turns out this man is dealing with a very difficult disease. And Bob was kind enough to walk him through at Methodist, and he comes through Riley sometimes when the people move around, walks over to Eskenazi. Well, I don't know, there have been 3 or 4 more times that we've run in, just coming out of Riley as I'm going into Riley, and you're going the other way, and so on. And I've always just think such a joy. I said, why are we crossing paths? And then yesterday morning, I was going in to Riley a little bit. It was about 7:30, quarter to 8, something like that. I was a little late. I was meeting a student. Paul Winchester's daughter, is a first-year medical student, Marion, was shadowing with me yesterday, first Friday morning. I was going in to meet her, but I was a little late, and I reached for the door, and who's coming out? Bob and his friend, who looks fantastic, truly healthy looking now. He's really, but a lot of it is through the friendship, and I don't know Bob well, but I feel like I know him really well in some ways. But it was another path to cross. So I said, "Can I take your picture?" Because it was just reminding me. And that's the picture I took Friday morning. And I thought, these are the things that, I meet thousands of people every day. Students and nurses and patients and every which way. But these are the ones that I really like to have happen. And to see, and I wasn't looking at my iPhone, thank goodness. And Bob wasn't, so we saw each other, and it was really good. So thanks, Bob. And so Carol Johnston, who's here a lot and professor at CTS and has taught this class a number of times. So she brought the students from CTS to talk about, and I was able to talk for a couple of hours just about the generosity in a general way, and how do you give and receive? Well, children are the ones who receive love unconditionally. Wish we could do that better. And that's I think the hardest part of love is receiving. And that's why I appreciate Carol. I always, help with her classes if she asks, because it's a great opportunity for me time limit is a little looser. I can talk for an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. And it's a great opportunity to also learn from people who are oftentimes mature, and older, and who are on this journey of study and a doctorate or master's in divinity, whatever it is, counseling, and so on. And so then I was walking through Riley, and and it turns out I took care of these girls, helped take care of these girls who were in the NICU for about 4 months, 25 years ago, almost 26 years ago. They were quadruplets. Pam and I know their family very well. But as they've grown, 3 are married now. Let me see which one. Elizabeth, I think. I was getting these mixed up. No, this is Elizabeth. Is a nurse in our NICU at Riley, in the liver period. And Abby is on child life staff. So I ran into Abby, and she's on our child life staff. She's a child life specialist. And she reminded me to follow up with this young lady who I just met. I gave grand rounds on unanticipated consequences of love to the pediatric faculty and residents and so on a few months ago. And afterwards, this young lady came up and met me, Cassie Dobbs, and she is an art therapist. So we had coffee a few times. She just liked what I was saying. So we got to know each other. And so she said, I've been to Kenya. I said, how'd you do that? She said, well, with 2 women up in Chicago. So I called them right away. And Kathy Moon is the professor and chair of therapeutic arts at the Art Institute. And my mom had sent me, as a little kid, I was probably picking my nose then too, when I was 6 or 7 years old, by myself, on an L from Melrose Park, first a bus for a half hour, then an L for 45 minutes, and I walked a half mile to the Art Institute. I probably 8 or 10 times to take painting lessons when I was a 6-year or 7-year-old kid. And my mom looked back and said, God, that's probably why you're what you do. And then Linda Stolz is not an artist, but she runs a fair trade business around art in Chicago. So I called them, and Linda was just leaving for Kenya. I introduced her to a man in Kibera, in the big slum in Kibera. She met him, came back, and what they do is they help run a small not-for-profit, and twice a year they take therapeutic artists. Now, her PhD, I looked up, was on spirituality and art. So I told her a lot about our Umoja project and global interfaith partnership here, where we're working with 4,000 orphans in Western Kenya. And I told her about the chaplaincy training center we're starting. So they looked it all up. They're coming down in a week and a half just to meet a few people. But they take, in January, they're taking the first one for next year, 17 therapeutic artists from Europe, Canada, Australia, and the United States for 2 weeks to Kenya and Tanzania. And they train potential therapeutic artists, but artists in therapeutic art in those countries of Tanzania and Kenya. So I thought, that's awesome. Because, we have the Mother Baby Hospital in Kenya, and that has led us into many, many directions. And by the way, I brought a box of these, well, I'll show it to you in a minute. It has a picture of this hospital, some of the art that's in it. Because I've always been interested in art. The art that fills this hospital was painted for the first time, these 10 women, 2 men with HIV, painted. But that art is covering the walls of the hospital. And I've always wanted art to go over in a sustainable way for the kids, the orphans. Well, what they train these artists in Kenya and Tanzania to use therapeutic art for is for orphans and vulnerable children. This was another connection. connection. I saw this man last summer. He's the one who carved chiseled most all these rocks into these bricks. Paul. Just reminded me as he doesn't get any credit. He didn't get paid the big bucks, obviously. But he helped build this cathedral. Well, about, 2 or 3 years ago, I got an email from this young lady. And she was getting a doctorate, just finishing it this year, in occupational therapy at Washington University in St. Louis. And for some reason, she had an interest in developmental childhood, pediatrics, and particularly in the neonatal period. And in Africa, she always wanted to go to Africa. So she found my name online, somehow emailed, and I emailed her back. We get a lot of, random kind of emails. And eventually she came up and shadowed with me 3 times in the NICU. I got to know her. And connected her with a couple people in different parts of Kenya, Eldoret and Nairobi. Well, a month ago, she left for 3 months for Kenya. She's in Nairobi. She took a keyboard that this other lady, Cassie Dobbs, had given me to take over to the slum in Kibera, and I'll show you why in a minute. So I had a keyboard. Here she is in Eldoret. This is a young, well, not so young lady who used to run a flower little kiosk by the mortuary, and I asked her to move down, and I gave her money to buy her own kiosk. She sells all sorts of stuff now, and she sells inexpensively the dresses that Doris Merritt and the ladies here make for girls, and helps distribute the blankets for the babies, and make a living to put her 2 kids through school. She's right outside the entrance to the Mother Baby Hospital. So Haley was kind enough to take those dresses in the last batch to her. Diane Matthews makes all these blankets, hundreds of blankets. Well, she took the keyboard here. This is Kibera, 1 million people in a square mile. And this is a little school that David Katavi helped start in the middle of Kibera. 350 kids. These are the neatest kids you'd ever want to meet. And here they are. In one of the classrooms. This is David Katavi. He was born there. He was born, you could take 1 step from the latrine and you're in his old living room. It's where his father still lives, right there. He was elected a councilman. It's a government office. He runs that district. There are 17 districts in Kibera, I think. They had just hired these 2 teachers. And this young man, 17, and he's an art and music teacher named Chacha. That's who I was sending he plays the keyboard piano. That's who I was sending the keyboard to. Now he's got a keyboard. He plays drums too. So Ken, he'll love it. I showed him musical DNA. He thought I'd love it. The other young lady here is named Lillian Mwanga. She is 34, has a 2-year-old son. She grew up in Kibera. She was a prostitute and a drug dealer. This year, she's halfway through her master's degree at Catholic University in Nairobi in community development. I invited her to come. We were doing a workshop on newborn hearing screening, training 6 nurses. And I asked her to come to University of Nairobi, Kenyatta General Hospital for that day, and she came and spent the whole day. Now she can screen newborn infants for hearing. She's just... So the end point is that Chacha and Lillian are 2 of 6 that are going to be trained by the therapeutic artists in January. We're raising $1,000 per guest. And we've got 4 nominated by Joseph Akuya, who runs the Umoja project for the 3,200 orphans currently in the program, with Celia's oversight here. And Joseph picked 4 other candidates who've been through the Umoja project, young adults, orphans, all orphans. One of them's an actor, theater, Michael. 2 are vocalists, and 1's an instrumentalist. And they're going to be trained in therapeutic art in January. We're going to finish raising the money. Hey, Chris. So here are the research nurses for the newborn hearing screen. So the reason I was going to tell you this, we were walking through the hospital. They have a newborn intensive care unit, and we got a $250,000 grant from Austria. Hey, Carol, I already spoke about you. And to set up this newborn hearing screening program for the first time in East Africa, to screen for hearing impairment, deafness in newborn infants, because we know the outcome is much better. And we need huge infrastructure. Of course, in Kenya, there are only 7 audiologists in all of Kenya. Sarah Mbegwe is one, and she's leading this program. She identified these research nurses. So we're walking through the newborn intensive, first we go through maternity and then through the newborn intensive care unit. Very busy unit, 100 babies. Huge delivery service. You know, Mother Baby Hospital, we're delivering 20,000 babies. They're now almost delivering 20,000 babies here a year. So as we're there, they say, well, there's one nurse here, and he was on the other side, standing next to that crib. And there's one baby in this unit, and it's the abandoned baby room. And usually there are 10 or 15 babies, but there was just one. And we were orienting and discussing whether to include these babies in the screening and so on. But I looked over, and this was the baby that had been just dropped off there a couple days before. It was a couple months old. And it was a baby with hydrocephalus, water on the brain, and with a myelomeningocele spina bifida, which can be fixed, and usually is fixed in the first day in this country. So at the end of that moment there, everybody's about to walk out. You know, we have a professor of cochlear implant from Duke who works with me on this, and one of our speech language therapist professors from here, and all these staff. And I said, well, before we leave, I just want to mention one thing. He said, here's a baby with spina bifida. And I explained, you know, what it was. It was going to be fixed in the next few days with a shunt for hydrocephalus and repair of the myelomeningocele. I said, but you need to remember that there's a little person there, inside there, in that butt, trapped in that butt. And just like the deaf babies that we're going to identify, who are trapped in their own world, we're going to be able to eventually build out, to help to integrate these kids into society, you know, and then the blind, and then the other syndromic, and the Down syndrome, and then the mentally ill, etc. I said, many babies with this advanced kind of hydrocephalus and so on will have some impairment. I said, but it reminds us who really has the special needs. Is it that baby, or is it us that need to open our eyes and hearts to even look at this baby? Nobody even was looking. I said, back home, one of my favorite men who ran our spina, we have 1,500 children with myelomeningocele at Riley at any given time, of all ages. The man who runs that program for 25 years here, my wife helped him some, is Dr. Tim Bryant, who happens to have myelomeningocele. I said, yeah. I said, remember. I said, don't keep us from judging, you know. Let us learn and embrace. And that leads to the Chaplaincy Training Center in Eldoret, around the Mother Baby Hospital. So we got a $100,000 grant from IU Health recently. We've been working for 4 years. Eunice Kamara is a professor of theology there, and put together a team of 11. This is 7 of them. And one of those is Gladys Machoki, who was sponsored by Second Premise, and then got a master's degree in Atlanta, and is now back there helping to teach CPE. They worked for 4 years to modify the program, get it approved by Moy University, It's now going to be adopted by the university. We think they're going to actually begin next year paying salaries. But we're doing a study before and after chaplains are trained, and we just enrolled the first 5 chaplains a month ago. It's unbelievable how inspiring. I just got an email 2 days ago from Eunice. She was sitting with one of the chaplain students who said, I can't believe this last year and now this last month, the difference. He said, I used to run around praying all day long. He said, now I sit and listen, and I'm learning so much from each person, and they want to talk to me. And then when I check out at night, I do it in an organized way, really about the needs of those mothers. We're doing the study in the Mother-Baby Hospital of those mothers who are living there on the 3rd floor who have babies in the NICU. We have about 100 babies a day in the NICU. But that's where we're doing the study. And I thought, wow, how wonderful that is as part of this, to raise up women and children in Kenya. And it's all done by these people. We have a team formally here, and Matt Bolton has allowed us to use CTS, Christian Theological Seminary, as the fiscal agent for this, but we're going to be developing, we hope, over the years, long-term exchange. And I need to raise $1 million for that. But we will do that. It will happen. You know, these things that are right, and especially this. This is interfaith. We have 2 Muslim sheikhs. And the only person we're missing that I asked them at the workshop a year ago, I said, no, you have Muslims, you have Christians, all different kinds of Christians. I said, where's the atheist here? And nobody stood up, and I said, well, we need to find that atheist. Make sure we have the atheist on our board, because disease doesn't pick a faith. Paul Nyangesa is the one faculty member from the medical school. He's an obstetrician who's on that board. He's just an amazing man. I'm sure he's got high-end Asperger's, because he has kind of no emotional instability around any of this work. He's kind of our rock, you know. And then this young lady was here in Deep Faith in Action class a couple of years ago. One of my favorite people. She's a pediatrician, finished her residency this past year, and is doing 2 years of kind of community service in a different district in Kenya. But we'll come back in a year and a half to do a fellowship in neonatology. And we'll become one of the first women neonatologists. Like that's what I do, newborn intensive care. And in the work probably at Moy, I hope at the Mother-Baby Hospital. She is just truly amazing. She's got 3 young kids, but this is going to happen. She was just presenting data at a meeting in Mexico. Incredibly bright, hardworking, and understands all of this. She's gotten to be friends with another young lady, who I'll show you in a minute. But while I was there 2 years ago, this man was there, and I took him with me on out to near to Kisumu. And here we are in Nakuru visiting an internal displacement camp. This is the owner of the Nakuru Lodge, Lake Nakuru Lodge, Joseph Muya. And this is one of our fellows who did a research project in the Mother-Baby Hospital in the NICU around nursing education. This is a worker at the lodge, but is an OB nurse. Just went back to school to get retrained for 3 weeks. And this is Ben Snipes, who are our church sponsor as a YAV, Young Adult Volunteer. So now we have YAVs here. But Ben was a YAV. We just were at his wedding a few months ago with Abby, the daughter of the head minister at Irvington Presbyterian Church, Bob Hymak, Abby Hymak. Yeah, he's if you want to see a living embodiment of social justice in action, that's Ben Snipes. And then just last Monday, I was interviewing some candidates for fellowship. We have a very strong fellowship program. Take 3 a year, but we have 10 usually. Take an extra one. Well, this young lady I got to know and brought out a year ago from Harvard, pediatric resident, because she had worked for a small startup and had helped develop the home testing device for HIV. and wanted to share it and learned about the empath program in Kenya, IU-Kenya Partnership. And she also worked with a company that does small devices, and we just started a laboratory finally to do microanalysis for different chemistries for these tiny babies on drops of blood. And so Monday afternoon, I interviewed Jessica for fellowship here. She remembered that when she was in Eldoret the first time doing a rotation, she was in the NICU. And that's where she became friends with Felicitas. Makoha, who's my favorite person, almost there. So here they are, worlds apart, connected. And they took time to know each other and remember. I'd forgotten they had become friends, and Jessica reminded me. So I'm hoping she's got a master's in public health, very interested in global health, and all for the right reasons. Incredibly talented, so I'm hoping she'll come and we get to train her. And we have a lot of opportunity. And then I was walking back, and here came across this father of twins that I took care of a few months ago, and one died. And he now is 8 months old, or 4 months old, I guess. Yeah. And
4 months
corrected, yeah, doing very well. Yeah, with a surviving twin. But it just reminded me again, because the person taking care of him was this young lady. This was as a newborn. This is her now. She's a manager in the NICU at Riley, nursing manager. Just had her first son, married. And she was in Kenya when she turned 28. She's 31 now. Helping that other fellow teach the nurses in the NICU. We got to celebrate her birthday, and I told everyone at the IU house, I said, now here, Ashley, you give her cake, sing happy birthday. I said, but the rest of her story is that I got to take care of her on her ventilator when she was a newborn at Riley. And here she is in Kenya teaching nurses in the Mother Baby Hospital in the NICU. And that reminded me of this, this art. You've seen some of this art hanging on the walls. And that's this book. Because I was involved in taking care of these twins who were about 23 weeks, 32 years ago this year. And this is them. He just passed away last Christmas of lymphoma. Janet just is, I think, going to get remarried. They owned a printing company on the south side of Indianapolis. And they're the ones, we raised $1,500, they printed 2,000 copies of this coffee table book, and you're welcome to have one at the end, if you'd like. Because it has the stories of these 12. All of them have amazing journeys with HIV and everything you can imagine. I always remind the struggle, yeah, that's why giving therapeutic art opportunity to these 6 young people, the ripple effect from them to these children who are all orphans, and let them see their own gifts of music or dance or painting or photography or poetry or whatever. It's going to ripple forever, and those kids will teach other kids and so on. That's why one by one, but in a way that is sustainable and allows leadership to lead there. So anyway, so they're connected. And then, of course, there's Stella, who tirelessly works. And Gordon Mendenhall recently became a good friend. And Gordon's a retired teacher, an eminent teacher of high school in Lawrence and then University of Indianapolis, science and genetics and so on. He does vision projects, so he's learned to refract eyes in villages in Congo and Kenya and Tanzania and so on, and Uganda. And a year ago went on a trip with Stella to Uganda, Kenya. And Stella's about to take off in a couple of weeks for Uganda, who works tirelessly with a handful of girls to allow them education to prevent female circumcision, but really to heal holistically. So you look at all this, and I've used this before once about taking risks. You know, how do you go about taking risks? And I've shared with some that you know, risks are, I think from what we talk about in risks, it's where Christ taught us to be in the first place. So I always look at this like this. You know, when you land, it's where we should have been. And those are the people we should have known, always. But so many of us, you know, when we see something different, a homeless or whatever, we kind of walk around, maybe put our eyes down. But it's so important, I think, I've learned so often to engage. I was kind of an introvert as a kid, but I had to learn to say hello. And it was more, it's not trying to be an extrovert, but my mom taught us to, you know, to be polite and to walk that lady across the street. I remember walking a bunch of ladies across the street. Yeah, it's probably some that didn't want to go across the street. But I, you know, it's always just, you know, being available, not intrusive, but being available, you know, and being accessible. I remember when we did that series on radical hospitality here in Faith in Action, and we learned that really radical hospitality is allowing someone to be in a safe place without judgment or expectation. You know, but to be truly welcome for who they are as they are. And that creates trust. And so I've learned a lot about that in the medicine that I'm involved in, and being in these incredible relationships with families, you know, through every kind of tens of thousands of these experiences that are so challenging. I mean, you're awed often by how they do it. How can they possibly do that? But it's life. It's part of our lives, you know, and we need to be there and with it, you know, and learn and walk. That's why still my favorite definition of faith journey is walking each other home. You know, we're walking together. Some people think they're a little better, a little worse, a lot better, a lot worse, whatever. But I think we should all be in this together, you know, with our Lord, and you know, passing that love on through. So, yeah, these are refreshing kids, but it all reminds us of the power of love. I don't know what time it is. I probably went over.
No, you didn't.
Oh, I didn't. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for listening.
So we actually have a little time for questions.
For a comment, or
Anyone?
yeah, Judy.
I'm not sure how to ask you this question, but I'd really like to know all of these strangers, or were initially strangers, that you were connected with. Do they know then, or do they eventually find out that you're a Christian?
Yeah, you know, that's Parker Palmer wrote a book called Let Your Life Live. Speak, Let Your Life Speak, yeah, that's right. One of my favorites, and it's on vocation, but it's not on vocation as a goal, it's on vocation as a gift. So I've always looked at faith as a gift. Not always, you know, obviously, like everybody, on the same page with Christ, and struggle with that oftentimes. But I can't tell you that most of the time. I think eventually I would say yes. Almost always people will know I'm a Christian. I don't evangelize. I probably should speak more about it, but especially in Kenya, it's very easy, much easier to speak about it there, just because it's palpable, it's common conversation. But it's interesting that even though it's very common, there is nothing published on the role of faith in healthcare. That's why we're doing this study, to publish this. For one of the first times, there are only 5 or 6 papers in all of Africa on the people, that's why chaplains don't exist. There aren't chaplains that will help families realize the importance of their faith or value of it as they journey through, regardless of the medical outcome or health outcome. But yeah, I would guess probably most do know. Yeah.
You evangelized for so many years.
Oh. Well, thanks. Yeah.
Other questions, comments? I was wondering, for those that don't know, if you might mention a little bit about how the Riley Mother-Baby Hospital came into being.
That's what I tried to talk for a short time and ended up talking an hour and a half in Carol's class. Well, it was because when we were there in 1994 for 3 months, Pam worked in the tiny little nursery, which was, twice as big as that piano, with 20 babies, preterm babies in it, and nothing there. And eventually we thought, although this partnership in Kenya is not about building buildings, but we thought it was important for those faculty who were willing to stay, because brain drain was huge. There were a handful of Kenyan faculty who were willing to stay and teach and build a medical school there. For those people to practice someplace they were proud of, and a resource, and then also families to deliver in a place that was beautiful to start their family. And so we ended up, first it was going to be $100,000, Carol. It was a little box, and it ended up then being $200,000, then it was $500,000, then it was $1.2 million, and it ended up $2.4 million. Well, we've raised about $3 million so far, and we're still working on it, but that's how it came to be. That's what gave me, somebody called it, what was it, switch to possibility or something like that? Shift into possibility. And I was mentioning that so often we kind of scrunch the dreams of our kids down to manageable, and we can raise enough money on the city block or the neighborhood, to do this project, rather than saying, well, you could probably get the whole city in on this one, and maybe even a few cities in on this one, and trying to let them really say, and that taught me that it's possible. It is possible, and it never ends. That's why I ended up, I think, my favorite quote, if it can be completed in your lifetime, it's not worth starting. Because that's God's work, Yeah, Mom.
Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote a play called Aspects of Love. And out of that play is a song, Love Changes Everything.
Mm.
And I would highly recommend it and suggest everybody, if not listening to the music, read the lyrics.
Love changes everything.
Love changes.
Andrew
It's
Lloyd
from
Webber.
Aspects of Love, Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. This has been wonderful.
Thanks, Becky.
I feel like, I told Jane, I feel like a real slug back here, not doing anything. But if everybody here, if we just make one teeny little ripple,
Yes.
just those of us in this room, I've been really inspired to, cause a ripple somehow in my life, whatever it is. And we've got a great banquet coming up this weekend. I'm involved, so maybe I can make a little ripple here in James and Tall, whatever the venue is that we're in, whether it's working, yesterday at the bazaar. You've just inspired me to somehow get a little more focused in helping people and not just being too concerned about my golf score and, things
Well,
like that.
that's important. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Those are good words.
Anyone else?
Well, great. We'll have a...
Well, I'm astonished that we're actually through in an
Yeah.
hour. This is
Yeah.
great. I've known Jim for years, and this is...
It's a miracle.
Well, for someone whose life moves in circles, I think it's hard sometimes to be linear. So
Yes,
I appreciate
yes.
your presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the last in this series of classes, and what a great finale. I forgot to send around an attendance pad, so I'm going to put it back here if you wouldn't mind signing that on the way out. That would be terrific. And I'm sure Jim will stick around for any questions or
Yeah,
conversations.
if you would like a copy of that book,
Yeah.
you're welcome. I have a box full over here, so please take one.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.